This should be relatively quick, but it may be hard for you to see, but the lines in Pacific Avenue are all quite short, quite tight. So I've been playing around for the last little while with longer lines and prose poems that I want things to spread out. I want to take more into my lungs as I blow through this. What I've been doing, some of you may know this already, I've been writing a long poem on Twitter. So each of these stanzas is a Twitter stanza. But unlike a lot of the Twitter poetry I've been able to find, this is not short little lyric poems. This is pushing towards something longer. Roughly, it's about thinking through some of Glenn Gould's biography and some of his recordings, my own biography, Hegelian notions of history and technology, and you may or may not see that come up as we move through these. These are all unaltered. They exist on the web as I'm going to read them to you, which may or may not be a mistake. That may change. 2. No sacred mounts, there we sing accompanying scores, sound poems, self-sure, long, leafy bowers, already Heimlich in the damp November half-light. Envelops the singular individual atomic wraps, wool coat over wool cardigan, hat, muffler, glove, rich greens, browns, blood, red, burgundy by clan. No insignificant history to slip, name, geography, trade, our semi-canny aplomb, new world complicity, in time not quite too easy, not yet arrives. You acquiesce neighborly condescension, still struggle words, sanctity of language, device, figure, an unguarded trope, something to cover breath. Quirks of youth settle morph into oddities of age when surprise self in passing checks conceit of record versus selected misapprehension. Clear? Who fixes this line between outtake and on-air, appending forethought as, let's try it a bit more slowly from the repeat, eternal surfaces now. Largo, lentement, Combrio, a boat I sailed out of Ashbridges, a musical pastime, stage circuit, city north of the Great Lakes, submerged economy. Twice a week, Ella's session men, few of Rob McConnell's brass, head out to the start, drinks in hand, strict no music policy, young, curious crew. Let others shake it, tree the squirrel motley, and accepting pure distracts hone more than likely feelings for all ones who gives a damn, boyo. Evening walks in, announce the usual inflections, remonstrations, please, shouldn't have, I couldn't, my dear, require room service, hold court. There will be days like this, sweet meats and spiritual focus, caramelized, forgotten drawer drapes, slants of light, only slightly relevant at best. Line to begin the future, something like you. What will you do with your legs and your heart? Lisa Robertson. Please, proprietary box off limit. Stitch history for one who willingly claims this repertoire, then breaks in ringing telephone, dusty needle, coax us back outside with the dogs. To have said it, gee, serialiste, let alone written, we take it up at a ball game, my Spicer, your Schoenberg, beer, hot dog, 7th inning stretch. In good faith, we listened as our teachers argue modernism arrives 5 years late, politely. Imagine a difficult passage, vice versa, bundle up. Judgmental, defensive, not worldly or Catholic, we unpack provincial zeitgeist as irony is misplaced. Move again. Can I, more Germanic, less frank? The body is handed down to us, organs intact, falters each reading, recital, addition, decommission, another Casavante, inchoate road, a studio suite. That way until narrative drives myths, sets one eclipse, entitlement, privileges, idiosyncratic postures, calculus, touches, voicings as in game. Fetal, maternal, collegiate institutes enact misgivings, embody limits, short walks home, play at garden fence, hymnals unspoken, shrouds affluence. At the moment performance morphs to product, or imagine for me Joe Poetry Day, civic commercial pride of place, belonging, beaming, channeling. I'll stop there. Okay, thank you.
What's your interest in Glenn.gould? Does it have anything to do with the fact that you have the same first name, although spelled differently?
To a large extent, that's it. Yeah, it has to do with that. It has to do with neighborhoods that he grew up in. My neighborhood, went to the high school. You know, his parents were friends with my grandparents. But more than that, it has to do with his interest in recording. That I see Pacific Avenue, as I said a few times today, as being a book about images and a book about poems and family memory. And I don't want to do that for a while. And I become more interested in sound. That I realize when I'm reading that sound's a big part of what moves these poems, moves me into poems. And so thinking about Glenn.Gould and thinking about his kind of fascination with recorded voice and radio versus the performative, his own kind of anxieties around performance, that's a big part of it. And technology. He was experimenting early on with multiple tracks of recording himself. For those of you who don't know, he was a kind of consummate interpreter of Bach. And Bach's music is very mathematical, very organized, very ordered. And Glenn.Gould plays it loosely. And he created all these, he did all these faux pas where he would sing over his own recordings. He played on a chair rather than a piano stool. And his chair would kind of rock and creak. And he'd hum these incredibly complicated lines as he was playing. Well, if you're trained as a classical pianist, you don't do that. Right? The human voice is subsumed beneath the interpretation of the score, which is supposed to be a perfect playing of the score. Well, he infuses it with a certain kind of body and humanity that creates all this excitement when he goes back and records the Goldberg variations in 1955. And he's also a young genius in Toronto at a time when Toronto wasn't supposed to have geniuses. Toronto was very much a provincial colonial town in the 50s, and the fact that this consummate interpreter of Gould lived in the colonies, lived in a kind of provincial Toronto, is also interesting, upsets the idea of classical music and performance. In thinking about it and working through it, one of the things that became interesting to me is how Toronto and other cities in North America were necessary to Europe after the Second World War. And if you imagine the Second World War as this kind of massive devastation, where all of the cultural production and social production gets flattened, where are you going to grow a pianist? Toronto's not a bad place to do it. So, kind of, again, thinking around place, thinking around body, recording, performance, text versus performance, or text versus reading. Also, digitization. That he's an early experimenter in the digitization of sound.